All right, guys, what's up? Doug Polk here. I want to thank you for joining us here on the channel for a podcast with Bill Perkins. The podcast we've been trying to get for a while, and it is about to happen here today. But before we jump in and talk to Bill, I want to quickly let you guys know I'm going to try and do some podcasts over in the cryptocurrency space. I had a secondary channel I think some of you guys might have seen from time to time. I'm going to be taking that channel and turning it into the Coin Central channel. We're going to get some people on in the crypto world. If you're interested in being a guest, you can always tweet at me at Doug Polk Poker. I want to get some interesting people in the crypto space to stop on by and talk about the world of cryptocurrency. There is one catch though. You need 10,000 subs to use this software for podcasts. So we're gonna have to get to that number before I can do any of those. If you're interested in seeing that happen, you can head over to the Coin Central channel. Should be a link in the description below, and subscribe for some cryptocurrency content. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and introduce today's guest, Bill Perkins. Thank you for joining us on the pod.
Thanks for having me. Finally, the technology's working, so we can talk.
You know, it is funny that it is 2017, but internet's still a problem from time to time.
Yeah, in the most surprising places, right? Like 5-star hotels with I guess they're so old school, right? You know, it's like, Winthrop and these older people who just didn't use the internet or have no need to because they're just hanging out on their yacht or whatever they're doing. And so they don't really think like, wow, high-speed internet is crucially important for most of the younger generation.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I've as someone that travels for poker and trying to play online, oftentimes I'll call someone and be like, "Oh, well, what's your internet like?" And they're like, "Oh, it works." It's like, that's not what I mean.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it gets there. You can get a message through.
All right, so let's just jump into it. And I want to start off for some of the people here on the channel that might not know who you are. How can you give us a little background on you, kind of your story, how you got to where you are today?
I was born and raised in Jersey City. We'll start there. Fast forward, I went to school at University of Iowa. I came back to Manhattan. I worked as a assistant peon on the New York Mercantile Exchange floor in the heating oil and crude oil pits. Kind of baseball worked my way up, traded, etc. Moved to Houston, Texas during deregulation. Ran an options desk and traded. Most of all my money comes from trading, energy derivatives, and development. I've been immersed in the risk-taking world since being on the floor, since a kid when you played AC/DC or whatever, since forever, and kind of just recreationally, not really taking it serious, but looking at it as a recreational, just gradually moved into poker and played, and hopefully improved over the years, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So you would say that you've always been, a gambler in some capacity?
Yeah, I remember, it's a funny story that people say, well, you would never do this if your whole role was on there. And I remember making like, I don't know, $20-something thousand a year and being in debt $40,000 on like basketball futures, right? Because the clerks actually ran the basketball futures and I took like a really big position. It was actually the year that like the timeout with the Fab Five. And so, we were used to taking a lot of risks relative to net worth.
Yeah, I guess that's something that, when you're coming up in the world, it's fine to do. But then once you hit certain thresholds, the amount of damage that you do to yourself if you lose just far outweighs the potential gain of like continuing to run it up.
Yeah, at a certain point, like you reach an increment where to go to 26,000 to zero was no big deal, right? Like for me, or and then like work it up, etc. But to go from like your first million or a couple million or 10 million to zero is significant because the amount of effort it takes, and also just things going right, luck as well. It's like, wow, how do I get back there again? But it's possible. I've done it. It's just really, it's that much more in your psyche. And people would tend to become more and more conservative. I only know a few people who were fairly robotic about risk reward and kept trading until they were billionaires.
So you actually finally know of people that managed to go from nothing to billionaires through trading?
Yeah, well, yeah. I would say it was, they were salaried employees, right? Came out, John started his own hedge fund, and he put all his money, 90% of his net worth in his fund. He started it, and so he took his money trading that he earned there, stuck it into the fund. There were 4 of us, and turned it into billions.
That's pretty decent. That's
yeah, it's strong. It's one of the most epic runs in the history of trading. Never mind just commodity trading, but just in the history of trading.
Let's actually talk about a few of these types of questions generally in this subject now that we're already here. So what do you think are some important traits for success? I think that a lot of people that, when I reached out and asked everyone what they wanted me to ask you in this podcast, there were a lot of people that kind of, I think, view you as somewhat inspirational as someone that's like really succeeded by doing their own thing. So what are some important traits do you think for someone needs to have to be successful in trading or business or just in general?
I think one of them is integrity, and a lot of people would not say that, but integrity is kind of keeping your word, even your word to yourself. Like, I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. and then, you don't get up, you hit the snooze button, or I'm going to go work. I mean, we break our own word to ourselves, I don't know, so many times a day. And that filters on. I'm going to meet you, or I'm going to call you. We say these things without meaning them, that our word becomes useless. And to be successful, you have so many things that you have to do, and that you have to put deadlines and overcome obstacles. You have to keep your integrity to yourself and to other people. And then the other thing is I've been saying recently, and I don't know if it's the most important thing, but I was delusional when I was younger and I was a kid. I always thought I was going to make it. I always thought I was going to be rich. I always thought, like, any idea, trade, etc. I just thought, I was borderline arrogant or arrogant in my grand delusional thinking. Now, I'm not saying that if you're delusional, you're going to be rich, but I think you need that kind of like crazy optimism to try. And so I was willing to step into the ring and take the risk and try, because I had this delusion I could make it. If I was a realist, I don't think I really would have tried. Right? Like, I'd have been like, wow, the odds are so against me, and I'm going to spend all this time. Why don't I take this nice, safe government job? I'll get a pension, etc., have a nice life, etc. But I was shooting for the stars. I wanted it, and I had these delusions of grandiosity, and through luck, hard work, things going right, etc., it came to fruition.
What would you say as far as luck and hard work goes? Because when you look at the people that are really successful, there's obviously a mixture of both. And I see all kinds of, I see some people where I look at someone like, man, that guy was going to be successful no matter what. I see some people where I'm like, despite all odds, this guy is successful. Where would you say on the scale, your success is? Would you say that it was primarily hard work and a little bit of luck? Would you say you got quite fortunate a lot of points in your career? How would you describe your own personal success?
You have to give it context, right? Because there's no Bill Perkins in 1955, right? Like, it's just it's like, I'm lucky to be born post civil rights, right? Like, without that, it's just like I don't exist. And so, given this arena that I'm born in, I take out all those other lucks, right? 2 college educated parents, dad that got a scholarship, oh, by the way, because he was good at football. He played football. My mom, all these things that like prime me for success. So if you take that and have another kid exactly like that, then I would say it's a lot of like, I would say it's like 70% work and 30% luck. But there's just so many things. I had to be in a niche market at a time. I believe, and I probably delusionally so, that I would have made it in tech, or I would have went to Silicon Valley. I would have went anywhere to get to this financial goal that I had, and I would have made it. But that's just me talking delusionally, and you can never really know. So, but in the grand scheme of things, luck is like 90% of it. Like, I could not exist, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, right? Like, this just doesn't happen. I had to be born in the United States of America in a expanding economy, growing market, all kinds of distortions for me to take advantage of, and I had to have the type of brain that would want to take advantage of those distortions. So, a lot of luck.
Oh, look, I like it. I do think that it's good to, as much as you possibly can, try and view yourself in an unbiased way, because I think like people just get so caught up in their own mindset and like they were destined for greatness and like all this stuff. I think that oftentimes that can be kind of the downfall of people in various ways if you have that type of mindset. So I think it's obviously great to have that unbiased perspective like that. But you said something there that I thought was really interesting. You said you're talking about this monetary goal that you had in mind. And when you said it, I almost pictured you thinking of a number and you're like, yeah, I got there. Was there a number that you set out, like this is the point where I've made it? Or was it more of just like a general goal to achieve, I guess a lot of wealth?
Yeah, I think, you're younger, you just spit things out of your mouth and your goals. They're not as well thought out as you thought. But I remember, I know I wanted to be a millionaire before I was 30, actually 25, but 30 was acceptable. And I know I wanted to make at least $1 million a year. And I remember saying that like sophomore in college to some people, and these people laughed at me like $1 million a year, like get the like, you know what I mean? Like, and it was really like, it stung. It was like, what do you mean? I'm in delusion land, right? Like, for sure, I'm going to get there, like, why don't you believe in me? And I will never forget that, because it was inspirational. It was like, oh, now, I have doubters. I have to get there, I'm going to go through whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah. I think making $1 million a year, like, don't get me wrong. Like you're in the top, like point whatever percent, but you're not in the top like 0.01% or 0.0001%. Like there are many people out there that make, $1 million a year.
Yeah. And so, back then it's like, you want to be a billionaire, you want to be the X, but I felt like if you make $1 million a year, you made it, right? Like you're not wanting for anything. You can pretty much splurge and go on to any event, any concert you want to, if you feel like blowing that year's salary on something. Like you're feeling pretty good, right? And remember, I'm old, so that was like 1990, 1992, that would be, 2-3 million today, right? And so, it just felt like a good number. And honestly, I think more the concept and the idea of freedom, the ability to do what you want, to have the financial freedom, the lack of worry was more attractive to me. And I didn't really think about like, well, I want to be in the 0.001% or 0.001% or anything like that. There wasn't that much thought to it except for freedom.
No, I totally agree with that. I wasn't trying to say that's the goal. I'm just saying I was just saying that there are a lot of people that do reach the goal of making $1 million a year. But Bill, like I always think of you as like being one of the younger guys. I actually don't know how old you are, and it just dawned on me like you might be pretty old.
I'm a geezer. I'm not even going to tell people. I'm gonna force them to go Google it. But like, I am basically a geezer. I'm trying to stay as young as possible for as long as possible, right?
The backwards hat helps.
Yeah, it does. It's part of why I wear a hat, right? I don't want to go out to pasture. I don't want to do that. I want to put the tapioca pudding and shuffleboard days as far in the future as possible.
So another person asked me, or asked on social, so they know you're a gas trader, obviously your PokerStars screen name and what, the source of your wealth has come from. What does that look like day to day? Like what does trading gas every day look like from like a actual, like what you do standpoint?
I think, there are different styles of trading. There's technical traders. There's like, now that people are flocking into Bitcoin, I think everybody's like learning about technical trading, right? And there's fundamental traders. And essentially, a fundamental trader takes all the information of supply and demand and tries to predict where the price has to clear for it to balance, right? Or where it needs, risk reward wise, where it needs to be given all the fundamental information. And so generally, weather is a big one of the biggest determinants of what's going to go on. If it's really warm, everything goes wrong. If you're bullish in the winter, and if you're short in the winter and it's very cold, it's gonna rally, right? It's just such a big demand swing. So we solve for weather normal, and we lay out our odds, and we put on positions, and we wait. When we manage around them is my style of trading. So I'm not like the day trader who comes in the offices like scalping and trading thousands of trades and has algos going around, and I call it picking up nickels in traffic. It works, and then boom. I'm more of a, what is the most likely price? Is the market mispriced for risk for what's going to happen, for normal weather. And then we put on a trade and hope it either works or it doesn't. And we copy paste repeat. We're monitoring data, managing and changing positions if needed, either for risk management purposes or the fundamentals have changed.
I think that in the last like 10, 20 years, there's just been like an increase the markets have become increasingly efficient in many different markets. Cryptocurrency probably one that's still quite inefficient, but
right.
Many markets have become a lot tougher. You look at the stock market now versus like 25, 30 years ago. It's obviously like radically different. So has that same process taken effect in gas trading? Are the markets much more efficient now, or is it easier to make money than it was before because you just have more knowledge, or is it more difficult because of how much more efficient the market is?
I think it's generally more difficult. Two ways. The market has gotten bigger, but there's less risk warehousers. So the price at which things can get more and more distorted than they normally were before. And then also, right, like you'd have a fundamental analyst team, and it'd be this expensive team, and they'd be scraping stuff and pulling data and understanding pipeline flows better than anybody. And now their services have said, hey, we can hire like 20 guys and sell it for like $75,000 a year to everybody, right? And make a bunch of money. And now everybody has the same pieces of information, or a lot of the information. So, this massive gap in knowledge that we used to have has shrunk, right? It's like this, that, and the other thing we're ahead of them on. And also our understanding of what that information means, we may be ahead of them, but it's definitely equilibrating, right? The knowledge base is equilibrating across our space.
Yeah, the internet really has become kind of the great equalizer in many ways. I think a lot of industries had information asymmetry, in the way that you're describing here. But now it's way more about like how robust your process is for interpreting that data and then coming to good conclusions. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And even in stocks, it's amazing. Like you can go on Seeking Alpha. I mean, you basically can crowdsource and have everybody do your homework for you, right? Like these guys are like, well, here's my model. I'm a smart guy. I'm going to write all my reports, and it's going to be so detailed, and everybody's going to follow me, and I'm going to get paid per view, right? And so now you want to know about any stock, you can go on Seeking Alpha, and then you have the whole series of eggheads doing their competing analysis, and you can pick and you can run stuff, and they'll be like, oh wow, I didn't know about this. I didn't even know to look at this ratio, or et cetera. And so it's definitely equilibrating across all markets faster and faster.
So those nickels you're picking up in traffic are starting to look more like pennies.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. Like there used to be high frequency trading. It first came out, and there was like quarters. They were, the SOS traders, and now these robots are fighting over milliseconds for, eighths of a cent, a jillion times. And so there's reports out about how much the average investor has saved on bid ask because of technology and people coming in, the liquidity that's provided where everybody's competing. And so that money has just come out of the pockets of somebody, right? And so it's happening across all markets, across all industries. So really your ability to digest the data and have a little bit more forward thinking about what can happen and things a little bit more probabilistic versus this is going to happen. Like this is undervalued by $10 and it's going to go up $10, right? That type of thing. You do get them because you do still have large flows of capital that act rationally from their point of view, but irrational versus the price of the market, right? Like I'll give you an example. In our market, we have inflation hedges, right? They're like, what's my biggest risk? Inflation. So they buy an inflation bucket of commodities. They come in, they buy natural gas. It creates a permanent length in our market, irrespective of the fundamentals. And so that distorts the curve, right? And we have producers who, they drill, they produce gas for $1, it's trading $1.50 out the curve. They don't care. They drill, they sell, they take the money and run, right? And so that puts pressure on the back of the curve. And so we get these curve distortions that create opportunity based on hedging demand.
Oh, interesting. So it's more important for them to kind of secure a price based on inflation than it is. Oh shit, I'm like going off sudden. Oh man.
You want me to take you down a notch. Go ahead.
So it's
Better?
more important for them to protect themselves from inflation than it is to try and maximize, get the best price per unit.
So for some people, for sure, if you're a sovereign wealth fund and you have, I don't know, $200 billion, and you're like, well, our inflation risk, we're going to go in and buy the Goldman Sachs commodity index, right? And it's mainly crude oil, this, that, and a certain percentage of it is natural gas. You know, a couple $1 billion flows in to hedge them, right? They don't care. They're not there. They're not in it for the scrape. And then those contracts distort each individual market depending on how much of an impact they have, right? It's just permalink that doesn't care about the fundamentals. They're not there for this winter or this summer or whatever fundamentals going on. They're there in case shit goes to hell and inflation, you know, hot dogs cost $10, $30. They might already cost $30 at a World Series game, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's a hedge. It's not the goal of the fund.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, technical analysis, we should buy gas because it's no, if you know, if they're trying to avoid Germany circa, you know, World War I and that type of thing.
It's a good thing to avoid. So let's actually talk about the future here a little bit on a couple of fronts. And we discussed this, I think, a little bit when we were playing on Poker After Dark. And by the way, guys, eventually we will talk some poker, I promise you. But let's talk a little bit about the future. And I want to start off with talking about kind of like, you know, where jobs are going in this country, where jobs are going in this world. You know, how do you see the replacement of many of you know, jobs that people hold right now being automated and replaced by machines? Because I feel like that's a big problem that isn't really getting the amount of airtime that it should be getting from like a societal perspective.
That's interesting. There was a big, I think it was last year or the year before, a big TED talk and debate from opposing sides on what would happen. And, you know, historically what's happened is you know, 80% or 90, there's some stat, like 80% of the jobs that were, you know, 70 years ago don't exist. Where did all those jobs go, right? But they're in different fields, et cetera. The problem is that, you know, it's like, all right, the typewriter goes away, or the, you know, the buggy whip business goes away. There's all these other industries coming out. It's never been a threat to every single industry or as many industries at one time as it is now. And so, you know, I'm under the impression that eventually we will have to go to a UBI, which is a universal basic income. And you know, we joke about this. It's like essentially everybody's going to be in the entertainment business. We're all going to entertain it. There'll be jugglers, there'll be actors, there'll be singers, etc. But that will be the only job that's left to do. There'll be robot surgeons, there'll be robot this, there'll be robot lawyers, there'll be, you know, AI this, AI that. So the jugglers will entertain the you know, the acrobat. You know, the acrobats will entertain the singers will, you know, the actors, and that's going to be our economy. But you know, I really don't know, because I'm not as necessarily concerned about the end. I'm concerned about the transition. And transitions can be chaotic and destructive if not handled right. Because when you're out of work, or a bunch of people are losing their jobs and they're getting retrained, or, you know, as that generation gets older and that's on, it's like, what happens then? Does like crime explode? Does, you know, does society decay? Do we have revolts and you know, wars and etc. when those resources or that income goes away while the jobs are taking off? So the end state, if we can get there, I'm okay with, right? I think, you know, it's that bridge, right? While you know, 20,000 truckers are out of work because, you know, and 10,000, you know, million. I don't even know what the number. It's like a ridiculous number of truckers and drivers are out of work, and then, you know, it's happening automation in restaurants and drone delivery and, you know, self-checkout and yada, yada, yada. As that happens, you know, people are like, oh, they can get retrained, and it's not quite there, right? I think the idea of the future is there, and the mechanisms to get to self-driving trucks, checkout, et cetera, are all well laid out. But what to do in the interim with those people is not well laid out. And so I think that's kind of probably the biggest discussion that needs to be had.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, just to go back to what you were talking about earlier, there are a lot of people that feel like whenever a job disappears, a new one appears. And And I would say that I'm not on board with that. I would say that there's some amount of that that's true. You know, for example, like if a job is taken away by a machine, then there are now new jobs to like, you know, fix the machines or like, you know, help operate the machines or like help design new ones or all of those kinds of things. And that's true. But as mass automation becomes more prevalent in many industries that we have not seen it be in before, then we start to see that it's not a one-for-one trade. You're not like, oh, we're getting rid of one job, here's a new job. You're getting rid of like, you know, 20,000 jobs, here are 500. And those are 500 probably well-paying jobs that create, you know, some good positions for people that have the expertise to get them. But the majority of people are going to lose out, you know, with that transition. And we are seeing that across, you know, many different industries. I like that you brought the truckers, because if you weren't bringing it up, I was going to bring it up. That is one of the biggest jobs here in America, in terms of just like the total amount of people, you know, that are truckers. Like, we love our trucks and we love moving stuff. And that's like a big part of the American economy right now. Those people in 10, 15 years, you know, if not sooner, but I'm being like a little more conservative here, they're not going to have jobs anymore, and they don't have a natural replacement. We're already seeing like McDonald's roll out automated, like, you know, you don't even talk to a person, you just talk to a machine, right? So we're seeing many jobs that are kind of at like one of the lowest, you know, I'm trying to think of how to describe this exactly, but some lower income jobs that are very common being replaced on mass scale. And I do think that that's going to create some issues for us as a society. So what do you think are some things that like we need to be aware of? We're getting super meta here, by the way.
Yeah, I think like one of the things you have to be aware about is like, even if there are going to be new future jobs that are undefined right now, you know, it's not good to have like 30% unemployment or 40% unemployment in any period, or to have people below sustenance that much around sustenance levels. And what you're saying, you can see in the data, right? You see GDP, you see productivity go up, wages are stagnant, or average wages are stagnant, et cetera. And basically, the owners of IP or those capitals or existing infrastructure that are able to deploy this technology are reaping more of the gains. And so, and then you can also see it in the, you know, not necessarily unemployment, but the employment as a percentage of the total workforce, because people just stop looking for work, right? And so a lot of people just dropped off the rolls, and it doesn't show up in unemployment, but it shows like percentage of working age people working is going down, which is a big problem in the future. And so, you know, I do believe that eventually, you know, people are going to have a certain freedom if we're able to give it to them, right? And so, and that comes with a economic freedom. And so I firmly believe that, you know, you get rid of a lot of the other social safety nets and you have a universal basic income for people. So that if I just want to be a poet and that's what it is, and it doesn't pay, then I can be a well-educated poet or an artist or whatever field it is, without, you know, becoming a destructive force in society. It's you know, most people are like, oh, welfare, and then people won't work or whatever. I'm like, they're not going to be able to work. Like, the trucker is not going to all of a sudden become a programmer or an AI programmer, right? And there's just not that, you know, it's the disintermediation of labor is going on in technology, right? You disintermediate the post office with PDFs and DocuSign and e-signing, right? Like, how many times I've signed so many contracts electronically, and you're disintermediating cash with Bitcoin, and credit cards was the first step, right? And now, you know, you're disintermediating. Well, I don't need an account. I have a calculator. Now I have a computer, and now I have QuickBooks Online, and now I have, you know, X, Y, and Z. So all these fields are being disintermediated, and we're you know, the human aspect of it is like, we don't have enough training, or there are not enough spots for these people. So I agree with you on that, and I think the answer is UBI.
I think you're going to face a lot of opposition on UBI for many, many years. I mean, like I feel like that's just so far down the road that I kind of worry about like the intermediary period where people are losing their jobs, and that isn't what, you know, is going on in this country.
But I'm shocked at like the forward thinkers and the people who are like seeing this happen on scale, that it's being floated internationally, nationally, it's being talked about. I mean, when you come down to like the pundit level and people get all like, you know, welfare moms and this type of thing, et cetera. But, you know, you can see massive just loss of deed for millions of people, and the gains from that go to a very few people, right? And so it's what do you do, right? What do you do? And you don't want to have roving bands of 40 million, 50 million people unemployed who know, you know, like it's destructive. They can't educate themselves. That costs money. They can't retrain themselves. They can't manage their pursuits. They can't help it. You know, life of crime becomes de facto the case, right? Like everybody will survive, right? And so at a certain level and a certain lifestyle. And so I don't see anything wrong with that. Like I don't necessarily, you know, there's a lot of inefficiency in all the programs we have. I think if you collapse them all and if you look at like UBI and what the cost is, it's actually, when you really look at the numbers, it's pretty small, right? It's a pretty small increment, right? $40 billion a year, $40 to $60 billion a year. That is slashing out all the other programs. And then you don't have poverty in the United States, period, with UBI.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with you. It's kind of distasteful or repugnant to a lot of people, but you know, I'm a libertarian by design, I guess. You know, and even the libertarians are like, UBI is something that provides freedom to people and doesn't shackle them. And I think it's just going to be a practical necessity.
There are many libertarians in poker, by the way. I would say that like I fairly closely identify libertarian, but the amount of poker players that are libertarians, it is actually kind of insane.
Yeah, I think they're on the side of you know, they're look at them, they're self-employed, right? They take risks. They roam around and live. They like freedom and they disdain anything. They're like, why can't I play poker online? This is retarded. Or, you know, why can't I do, you know, the government interference and like, as long as I'm not hurting. So like a lot of like the core tenets of being a libertarian just kind of match with their lifestyle and who they are. And they've been exposed to it and they see it. They see the principles without ever having to read like a libertarian manifesto, right? Or argument. So I think they naturally gravitate towards it.
That makes a lot of sense. What are your thoughts on Bitcoin and the world of cryptocurrency?
I have, you know, I'm slowly shifting more and more bullish to it, at least in the intermediate term. You know, it's just the value of the work done to prove a block, make it basically extremely hard to change that block, for a record to everyone see, to have a medium of exchange with also it being a record. There's value to that. I don't know what the value is, right? I don't know if everybody's going to say, hey, this is the new gold, and forget these big giant lumpy bars, you know, for store value. You know, looks shiny in jewelry occasionally, but yeah, no, normally it's just useless unless you need, you know, really good electronic conductors, and there's not enough demand for that. You know, this Bitcoin is fixed at a certain number. This is what we're going to use. And so right now, I'm bullish because I see the adoption going up. You know, a lot of people are seeing the value. They want to adopt it. They want to test it as a store of value. It's only 100 billion in market cap, so it has this belief and it has a fixed supply. So I say the fundamentals are very bullish for Bitcoin right now. The problem is that not being an expert on sentiment or for technology that may obviate it or laws that, you know, it could vaporize at any point, right? Or be severely damaged. And so I'm a cautious bull.
Yeah, I think I'm maybe a little less cautious, but I'm definitely not one of those people that's like, it's the future no matter what. Like, it can only win. Everything's good for Bitcoin. You know, there are people that they hear a government bans it, and like, this is great. This is exactly what we needed, like all the time, no matter what happens. And I do think that that's a little bit much. I do believe in virtual currency. You know, I think it's kind of interesting with Bitcoin because from like a tech standpoint, Bitcoin is certainly worse than many of the other coins out there. You know, I look at like the privacy coins or all kinds of other different projects that are going on. But because it was the first mover, it just has this huge advantage in the marketplace and in terms of like, you know, public, you know, acceptance and like understanding. You know, I was like watching a TV show the other day and like they made a joke about Bitcoin. And I'm like, that really kind of says something when it's like hitting mainstream where people know about Bitcoin and they don't, you know, people are not going to be able to understand like, I think a lot of the tech side. It's complicated. I barely understand it at all, and I've been in it since like 2011 or something. So I think I worry that like, you know, that there could be better coins than Bitcoin eventually, but the idea of a decentralized, deflationary currency, or at least store of value, does make a lot of sense. The worry is that, is it becoming like gold, where it's just a store of value, right? Rather than some of the upsides in having it as a currency, or is it actually going to kind of fulfill its original goal, which was to be, you know, a currency to kind of get around a lot of these fees, get around a lot of these banks, allow money to flow more easily.
I think it's hard for it to be a currency just in terms of like the transaction speed it would need to process all the transactions. Like you wouldn't want to stand there. If everybody started using, you wouldn't want to stand there for hours and hours waiting for the Bitcoin transaction to go through to buy a sweater, right? And so, but it's like gold 3.0, not gold 2.0, but 3.0, because you don't walk around with gold and like you can't shave off a couple slices of your gold bar to buy, you know, a Snickers or make changes. Whereas Bitcoin, you can take it everywhere. There's no reporting, et cetera. So it's an asset that can be pieced off easily and transferred easily. So it's a hybrid in my mind, but it's more of a commodity than it is like a coin or a currency. And it's like the libertarian's dream coin, right? It's has no government controls it. It crosses all borders, you know, whether you're in South Africa or Ghana, et cetera. Like mining, it's the people's value, and the people are saying it has value, right? It's not like there's a government or a king saying you must pay your taxes in dollars, and therefore dollars have value, because if you don't pay your taxes in dollars, you're going to jail. So that creates a demand for dollars, right? And you know, you can't pay your taxes in gold, you have to turn it into dollars, et cetera. Bitcoin is like, I think it's valuable, you think it's valuable, as long as we can exchange value, I will take it, I will give you milk, cows, whatever it is. And it has a little bit more fungibility because the people have said it's valuable, right? And it, like any fiat currency, right? We demand, you know, it's like it has value. I mean, we believe in it and it has value, and we have chosen it as a store of value, the people that are now holding Bitcoin, just like people have chosen gold. It could have been anything, right?
Yeah. Did you ever actually like jump in on the Bitcoin train, or have you been more of like a watching on the sidelines kind of guy?
I generally been, you know, when I first heard about it, you know, way back when it was like $10, like, I don't know, it was still kind of Beanie Babyish. I don't understand the coin. Like, you know, I didn't really care or take the time to look into like, all right, what is this technology, right? Like, this would be like a digital coin. Oh, you have a digital coin that has a certificate. I didn't look into, well, the proof of work and the fact when you do a transaction, after a couple of days, it's impossible to change. It's a record of work. It's like a monument. It will last forever, yada, 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 all these other things that people now probably well-versed better than I am on the kind of like simplistic genius of Bitcoin and its revolutionary, you know, the things of value, and the fact that you have to put in this energy to create a coin, and that has value, and it stays in the coin because it's unchangeable, et cetera, yada, yada, yada. And so I didn't look at it, but at right around 1,000, I was like, all right, I want to pick up. I think this thing is just going to keep going. Like, just from fundamental social engineering, looking at the demand aspect of it. And so between 1,000 and 3,000, I picked up some coins. I really don't have that much. I have like 93 coins left, you know, because if I play poker online, I'm like, oh, Bitcoin, you know what I mean? You accept Bitcoin, thank you, you know? So, yeah, and so like, you know, you're like, oh shit, that transfer, you know, I thought it cost me, you know, I thought I sent in 10K, I really sent in 20K, right? Because it's rally, but that, you know, that's woulda, coulda, shoulda talk. And so I have like a position. I want to hold it, and I think for the foreseeable, in the intermediate future, I do not see any kind of major catastrophe for it. I mean, there might be some volatility, some downdrafts, people seeking liquidity, mismatches in supply and demand, will happen and create these wild price swings. But I don't think it's going away in the next 3 years.
What do you think about some of these poker sites that are trying to now start that are centered around like blockchain technology or using the Ethereum platform? Actually, they're more Ethereum based, if not all Ethereum based, I'm pretty sure. What do you think about like that industry in general?
I think it's interesting and intriguing. I think there's like an awareness, right? Like first, not every single poker player has Bitcoin. Right. And I don't have Ethereum, right? And they don't have the wallet and the technology or whatever. So I think, I think it's a great idea. I really like it. I think it might be slightly mismatched in timing in terms of like the penetration of the coin and Ethereum, right? Because somebody said, oh, you can play poker on the site, and Ethereum is like, well, I don't have Ethereum. I got to get a wallet. I got to buy the coins, and I got to put it in, and there's this learning curve that I would have to go through, or other people would have to go through to really have the pool of players, right? Like the thing you want in a poker tournament or poker is like a bunch of people, right? You want your friends, families, enemies, everybody there playing poker so you can battle it out. And so those sites are a numbers game, right? They need, a network effect. And I hope they eventually get there. I just don't know if that penetration and adoption of Ethereum is enough to support a poker site, right?
Yeah, I pretty much entirely agree with you. I also think that how a lot of them are trying to create their own tokens, I just see that as, like the cryptocurrency world right now, everything's hot, everything's popping off, like the market cap's always going up. And I just think like, oh, well, crypto is hot and like, I like poker, let's do crypto poker. But I don't actually see a lot of benefit to using blockchain technology to actually play poker. For starters, it is actually kind of expensive to do so. And then also like a lot of the advantages, like, oh, it's provably fair because it's on all of our computers. I mean, how many people are really worried that like the deck is rigged? I feel like for at least most people playing poker these days, they understand that you're getting a fair shake in terms of what cards are coming out and what you're being dealt. So is that really that much upside that like, that the deck is being shuffled amongst like individual players? I'm not a fan of like the token idea, I think, almost at all. And I'm not saying that I couldn't be convinced down the road, but like, it just doesn't seem to make much sense. Like you're basically talking about how they have this barrier to entry. You can't play with your family. You can't play with like, your cousin or whoever wants to play poker and like you want to have like a fun game. You can't, because you're going to have to teach people how to like, buy Ethereum and then like
right.
buy this token. And so not only is there already such a huge barrier to entry in the world of cryptocurrency, but you're adding another step, another barrier where now there's an additional token that you have to play on the site. So like, what does that look like? Why are people buying these tokens? Explain that to like, Joe who comes home after work and wants to throw a little bit of money on and play some poker. Like, I can't imagine how that process is going to be easy to convert those customers.
I think they're early, right? And all these ICOs, right? Like in the first internet bubble, right? There were the .com crash. I mean, there was pets.com and all these other things that came out of it. And I'm not saying that's pets.com. I'm just saying, but there was also Amazon, right? And there was also, so there's going to be things that are going to last or going to be, proving of value in this test of time. And there's going to be way more things that are just like, either junk or close to junk or not as valuable. And so, going back to your point about poker is that you want to have it ease. Back in the old days, like, you want to play poker, swipe your credit card, here's a deposit, we'll give you a deposit bonus that matches above and beyond your thing, you're online and you're firing, right? And now you're like, well, I gotta get a coin, a thing, and another thing, and you're fragmenting the pool, right? And then you're like, oh, well, this guy's on crypto poker and this guy's on so-and-so and this guy's got whatever. And I as a general rule in the intermediate term, I don't think it's good for poker.
You think it's good for poker for these sites to be creating their own, or these it's hard to even know exactly what to call them. Companies creating their own tokens and sites.
I think like in the long run, plus 5 years, that could be the greatest thing since sliced bread. I just think right now it's a little early. And sometimes it's okay to be a little early to have the leader when it finally takes off and you have wide adoption of Ethereum. I just think that, poker has a lot of problems right now. Aside from just the US ban, it has a marketing problem. It has a recruitment problem. It's got a lot of issues. And so anything that fragments that, I generally frown on for selfish reasons, right?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with you. There are a bunch of problems within poker right now. But can you maybe get more specific on what you think some of those problems are?
Well, let's just let's do it by comparison, right? Learning poker and coming into the poker world, where do the new poker players come from? How do they learn it? How are they exposed to it, right? If you're a kid, even if you're a mom and you don't play baseball, you eventually learn the baseball rules because your kid played baseball or they played soccer. And by the time after your kid's 15, 16, you're an expert on the rules of baseball, right? You may not be able to play that well, you can't hit the ball, etc. Poker, how does the new person come into the world of poker? I think that's one, right? Like, how do we get new players? How do we draw these people in, a diverse crowd of people, so that it doesn't die off, right? Like some old African game, right? Like nobody plays that game anymore. They killed all the Africans. No, it's just and so it can die off that way. Second, when we get new players on, how do we reduce this ridicule factor? It's like the way that new entrants to poker are treated, that come on stage in a public forum in today's world, right? It's just it's horrible, but it's also just like it's counter to the goals of poker, right? To any poker player, right? And so I don't get it. I don't understand it. Maybe there are people that secretly want poker to die. I don't know, and there seems to be a lot of them. There seems to be a lot of them. So you have this huge recruitment problem, and then when they come in, they have this ridicule factor that well, I don't want to play this game. You're 6 years old, you sign up for the basketball team, and kids are booing you on the side. You're like, I'm not going back. Fuck these kids. I'll go play video games or whatever else. And then you have the platforms and the ability to play poker, right? So a lot of those are down and disparate, and they're it's all chopped up and you can't access it or whatever, and the US rules and that, etc. And so there's not really a way to recruit, keep, massage, and entertain and have them grow as a poker player and enjoy the game as it used to be. And it even in the heyday, it wasn't that great, right? It was great because most of the poker players were kids coming in and I want to be rich. I want to be Daniel Negreanu. I want to be Phil Hellmuth. I want to be Phil Ivey. I can do that. They can do that. I can do that, right? And they have that delusion, and you need that to get there, right? And try it. But it wasn't really like, wow, I love this game. This is a great social game to play it. I can also get good and scratch or make a little money. I can meet very interesting people, and all the aspects of poker that it is wasn't being put out there. And so poker can die, quote unquote, as we know it, and it has been dying slowly over the past couple of years. And so we have to reverse that if you want to have a robust game, America's game.
So I think I have a little bit more of a mixed perspective on this. I would say that I'm I have access to some of the most in-depth numbers and what people are watching and all of that type of information. So I think I have a good inside view on that. The biggest problem to me was one of the problems you brought up at the start. If you look at the demographic of who plays poker, it's getting a lot older because everyone's aging and there's no new people. When I look at the demographic of who's watching this channel, it's primarily people 25 to 35, which is not all by any stretch. But then there are way more people on the other side of that than there are people coming in that are 18, 21, 24. They're out there. there are some people out there that are watching, and it's not like a super small percentage of the channel, but it's, a definite minority and seems to be shrinking. And I think that there were a few things that are kind of at play here. I think for starters, I think that when Black Friday happened and these sites got taken down, I just think you really lost the ability for young people to get into the game, because the biggest problem for young people is that, poker is expensive. You want to play big, higher stakes poker, you need a lot of money, and young people don't have money. So the idea that I could put like $5 or $10 or $20 onto a poker site and play like 10-cent sit and goes or 20-cent sit and goes or like a $1 cash game or whatever, I think that's really great for poker, because if you look at just like total volume in online poker, the vast majority are extremely small stakes because people can afford to play it. And that's how you get those new people. Yeah, to some degree, it's like people being able to go play home games with each other or whatever, when you're a kid. But like at the end of the day, that when a kid, of course, being 18 plus, guys, I don't know what you guys were thinking at home. But that access is just not really there in the same way that it was before, because now poker has this negative connotation. Companies got busted, it's illegal. But I actually think, Bill, that we've turned a bit of a corner here in several ways. And I think poker's coming back to some extent. Now, I'm not saying it's like coming fully back and we're going to look at like, 2010, like the biggest years before, poker went away. But we got a lot of good things coming up. For starters, we've got, Pennsylvania now legalizing online poker. So that's the fourth state in America. Shared liquidity amongst all three of the states that were currently you currently could play online. Also great, and it sets a good precedent for intrastate poker. So that's great too. I think if we look at online poker revenue in the last couple of years, it's actually not really shrinking anymore. I think it went from a peak in 2010 of around 3.3 billion down to around 2.5 billion, and it stayed kind of steady-ish for the last couple of years. So we're not really shrinking in terms of market so much. And then we also have some new markets kind of emerging. We see Brazil getting into it. We see India is actually starting to like get into poker, which I also find pretty interesting. I had someone from India email me a couple of days ago, and they said like, Doug, like I was hoping you could stake me for this Indian poker site. Look, I think you have beautiful eyes, and I love that your ancestors ruled me for 400 years, and they were great. And I'm like, what is
I love that.
Who is this? I love that compliment too. It's like two really similar things, right? But anyway,
yeah.
And then one last thing here too. I do think that we are seeing somewhat of a resurgence of poker content. We see Poker Go, and while it's a bit different because they're doing a paywall, there still have been a lot of Poker Central, Poker Go events on NBC Sports. We see Poker Night in America on CBS Sports. We see more and more shows trying to come up and develop and grow and build. We see a lot more people on Twitch, on YouTube. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, look, the glory days are coming back. It's going to be just like Moneymaker 2.0. That's not going to happen. The biggest problems are younger demographic and fixing a way to not be playing against bots online. And if we can find some reasonable solutions to both of those, I think the pieces are in place for there to be a bit of a resurgence in poker.
Yeah, there are definitely people out there, Carrie Katz and fans of poker, fighting the good fight, right? Let's just call that the good fight, trying to like bring poker back, etc. And media exposure is going to be huge. Right. And people like, what's poker? What's a flop? What's this, et cetera. And then how it's talked about in that media circle, and the media is not just designed to poker heads. Right. We got enough poker heads, but they'll eventually die 50 years from now, whatever. Most of them be too old, aged, or whatever, et cetera. It's like, who is the new crop coming in? And you're talking about being online and that media exposure and stuff growing. And it's going to take a lot, because poker is not the only game that's out there. It's not the only distraction. It's not the only pastime, right? And so it's competing with a zillion titles of video games, esports, all the regular sports, all the movies, all the Netflixes, the HBOs, the Amazons, et cetera, people's leisure time. It's competing for all those. And so I agree, Poker Go and Nevada, and these are nice steps, I think, to stem the tide and maybe possibly reverse it. It's just going to take a lot more than that at every facet. And I just don't think that, the poker community and those who want this to grow, everybody's got to do their part, right? And whether that's like keeping your mouth shut when an amateur goes on and gets vulnerable on a table and makes some blunder, right? And you can talk, on my channel, like on the Thirst Lounge, I'm like, listen, you guys can say whatever you want about a play, you just cannot shame the person, right? And so, not shaming people, but talking about why this was a bad play is okay. But calling someone an idiot is not like. And I remember, like, in St. Kitts, I had a problem. Like, I had all these business guys. Like, we wanted to have a high stakes and have the business guys. And I had so many people like, I don't want to go on TV and look like an idiot and be called an idiot. I'm just not doing it, right? I'm just not. I'm going to go in there. And I had one friend who went on, was doing well, started drinking, looking at a player and goes all in and forgets there's another player behind him. I think it was Mike McDonald. I don't forget who it was. I think it was Mike McDonald. I forgot it was all in. He goes, well, what do I have to do? He goes, well, if he checks and there's no action, you still have to go all in. Goes all in. Of course, he has a vote or whatever it is. He's knocked out, and he was like,
classic
the biggest
Mike.
but it was like, he wanted to avoid that, and thankfully, there wasn't this, oh, what an idiot, and thing. Like the producers knew, like, hey, this is how, people make mistakes, especially new people, especially if you're drinking at a table, yada yada yada. There's no value in jumping on somebody for making a blunder like that. You can point it out it's a blunder and move on, etc. And that happens in sports a lot. And people don't realize this, but like your hometown sports announcer, etc., they interview the guy, right? If you work for KH2 Radio, the home of the Texans or whatever, before you get that job, they're like, okay, so-and-so throws a pick six, etc. What are you going to say? He gets burnt on a play. Like, how are you going to approach this, etc. And basic, I remember because the guy came and spoke to us at some sort of like, community. He said, essentially, I'm going to acknowledge the play and what the breakdown is, but I don't like I see him and attack the player, right? Like, I say, this happened, this is unfortunate, this can be, etc. And so there's that protection in other sports, right? There's no sense of be like, what an idiot, he should have been in the, he was clearly running the seam and you ran for the out and blah, 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 etc. It's like, oh, he got burnt on his play, he should have done this, X, Y, Z. In poker, it's like, what an idiot, you know what I mean? Who does this, blah, 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 etc. And I think that has a huge negative effect on poker, on top of the fact that, like, you already got people saying it's bad or illegal, which is false, all these other kind of craps. So my thing is, like, we need more honey to attract people to come in, not the vinegar.
Yeah, okay, so I agree with you. I do think that some of those problems are really complex. I will say this. I think that when you look at the way the community responds to people playing bad, I don't think it's just for recreational players. The community blasts regulars constantly if they make a bad play. The bar for what people are supposed to be when they play on TV or they play on a show or they play whatever is unbelievably high. If I make a video here on my own channel where I'm like, okay, here's a hand I lost, I'm gonna explain what I'm thinking. People are like, you suck and are making excuses. You played bad. And then the comments rain in. And that's for me, like a pro. Like I made, well, up until this year, I guess all my money for poker pretty much. And, it's like, I'm getting blasted for that, despite being someone that has played poker my entire life. I'm good at poker and have worked hard to be where I am. And then the thing is, I think the problem kind of comes down to this. The baseline people that watch poker don't really understand poker strategy very well. But they do know this. When you lose, you have lost money. And so they attack that person. They blame that person. They go after that person because, especially in some of these shows, the amount of money that person loses is so much money that they can't even comprehend having lost that much money. It's like this feeling that it's this feeling that they don't get to understand. It's maybe some degree of jealousy. It's maybe some degree of like thinking that you're spewing money gambling. It's maybe some degree of like wanting to blame like victim shaming or whatever. It's all kinds of things all in one. But this action from the community, it kind of happens across the board towards everyone. It's just obviously recreational players are more likely to make those mistakes.
Yeah, and I think there's a distortion. Like people can't understand, like, wow, that guy just raised and lost my car or my house or my full thing. And it's like, well, I was doing that before off the tables, not in your view, in my business, right? Like I've gone busted, right? So I've lost your entire life's earnings and then I've had to come back, et cetera. It's just that this is the level you're at. And in some ways, I guess it is kind of insulting and disgusting to people because whenever they see you lose, they're like, oh, you know what you could have done with that money, right? Like, but what if I won? You know, and so that, you know, that type of thing gets in there. I think I agree with you. It's complex. I really hope that you know, the people who have poker businesses, industries, the poker goes of the world are really focused on building the pool of people and not just serving the, you know, stealing the existing pool, right? And growing, finding ways to do that. That's all I got to say about that.
The tough thing too is that I don't think the community is looking at it from a perspective of what is going to like grow the game. You know, I don't think the community is looking at it like that. And in part, which, you know, makes some sense, is because like they're already struggling. They can't find a way to win. They can't beat poker at a small level. Why do they care if poker's around or not if they can't find a way to win? And I think that negative attitude comes across in many different forms throughout the poker space. You know, what I do find interesting is, as someone who's often in a position where if I review a hand, right, that's like one of the biggest things I do here on YouTube. I try to be generous-ish to the person that if they're like a recreational player or a business guy. Now, if they're like a pro or like they're like, you know, whatever, and they make a terrible play, I'm fine just blasting them because like you're a pro, you should be able to handle it a little bit. But you do have to be like a little bit more sensitive to the fact that like, you know, these people are stepping in and risking a lot of money, and you know, we should embrace that. You know, what happened to kind of Lauren Roberts after she played and like some of like the feedback from like the community, it was just so mean. And I just couldn't believe the amount of people that were just going to like sit at their computers and just like mash keys and attack Lauren Roberts for going out there and being part of that. And I don't know, I guess
it's kind of disgusting in a way. It's like the one thing poker like is obviously missing is female players and female rec players especially. Right? Like you have the pros, right? You have the wizards that study, et cetera, and they dedicate a lot of time to it. But the recreational player who's willing to go out and, you know, she's made her money trading and she's done her job and she's coming out there and it's just disgusting. It's just like so self-defeating, et cetera. And it's weird. It's like, I don't know. I don't understand the value proposition from that. Like, you know, but it's just, I guess it's, poker has a way, or the money or some aspect of it has a way of bringing out the worst in people. Instead of like, you know, why wouldn't you write like, hey, Lauren, here's what I see was doing wrong. You might want to consider this X, Y, and Z in the future. It's like, oh, you whatever, blah, vile, vitriol, blah, blah, blah. And it's really disgusting and just idiotic and asinine and very myopic. But perhaps their goal is to destroy poker.
I don't think it's as menacing as that, but let's move on. The chat is demanding
Yes.
some Dan Bilzerian stories. So do you have any good Dan Bilzerian stories? What's your relationship with Dan like? I know I see you guys hanging out a bunch.
Yeah, Dan and I are buds. We hang out a lot. We have different lifestyles. You know, he's a single perma bachelor. I have a girlfriend. You know, we come from different backgrounds. We're both in the area of like having some degree of freedom with capital, and you know, he's a he believes in the hedonistic lifestyle and experimenting, et cetera. And I was in that period for a while, and I definitely believe in, you know, chasing these experiences. So, you know, it's not as frequent as the images you see on Instagram, but it is true. It's like authentic Dan, right? Like, and so I don't know what crazy. I think most of the stories I probably couldn't even tell. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't even. My kids might see this, you know. So like I can't really tell a bunch of them. I think one of the funny things is like when you did that video of Dan playing on my account on ACR. So Dan is a degenerate. He cannot help himself. Like, and so if I'm playing poker, he's like, get over here. Let me do it. You're a pussy, Perkins. You gotta fire. And so he's just firing. And people like, you know, you're gonna get banned and blah blah blah, and you know, talking like, how'd you like it? I mean, the ACR is like, you know, you can't have Dan play. They're like messing you like, please. And then finally they booted us off, and I was like, thank the fucking Lord, he's gonna like lose all my money on his account firing because he just loves to punish, you know. And so, it was funny. That was a funny episode. He was upset when you did that video. I was like, he's just joking. It was kind of, I thought it was hilarious, that video. And you know, ACR banning, I was like, that was the best thing that ever happened to ACR. Literally the best thing that ever happened to him is like Dan got on my account. They were never ever permanently banning me for that. Like at the end of the day, it's marketing. They need more people in. And gosh, and I left that day. I left while he was driving. I was like, I'll bet you he doesn't have all. He was like up a lot of money. I was like, I bet you he has zero money within an hour. With Alan Keating, he goes, no bet. Sure enough, he calls me like less than an hour. Gonzo. And it's just, you know, when you have that much money as Dan and you're playing those stakes, he cannot possibly have the patience for a 2-5, 10, you know, he's going to lose the maximum amount of money in a 2-5, 10, 20 game. Dan is pretty dangerous at high stakes. And so one of the things I want to say on your show is like the insinuation on your podcast was, could Dan have made this much money playing poker? That is 100% true. The millions of dollars he made that year, he did make in the high stakes games in LA, which a poker pro could never get in, right? But Dan holds his own in high stakes poker in those big giant games.
I'm not debating whether Dan is a lifetime winner from poker. I have heard from many people that he's won a lot in some of the private games. My problem is saying he's won all of his money from poker, because I'm just not going to buy the story based on.
No, I don't think he said that though. I don't think he's ever claimed that. You'd have to pull that off the record. I mean, he's Dan Bilzerian. His dad's Paul Bilzerian, the original badass, right? I mean, his dad is the nicest guy in the world. You know, like I read, read Barbarians at the Gates and all these books, and you know, he's in there and the corporate raider, and he's just like the nicest, sweetest guy. But he's the original badass. I mean, there's no version of Dad getting all his money from poker, and I don't think he claims that at all. And he even jokes about it. He has a post on Instagram or a tweet where he's just like, I don't know if you did you see the movie Dodgeball?
A long time ago.
Where there's a quote where the guy's like, you know, I built this place on hard work, sweat, tears, and a small inheritance from Papa. So, you know, like Papa Bilzerian, he like requotes that and puts that in one of his posts, you know. That's awesome. Like, you know, he knows who he is, right?
But the thing is, also, he went on the Joe Rogan podcast and said he made all of his money from poker.
Might have been that year, but I don't think it's. I want to pull that clip. Well, I'll bet this one.
You'll bet this one?
Hey, I'll bet this one. I just don't know Dan to be a liar, so I just want to. I want to say, like, he said that he made all his money that year, or did he make all the money in his life he's gotten from poker?
The question was, how did you make all your money? And then he gave a really long-winded answer, and then Joe Rogan doubled down, and then he said from poker. I'm like, I'm not going to take your money because I know the clip. I know that's exactly, like, we went through this and made some jokes about it.
Okay, I got to see it. Yeah, I would just, you know, if he said that or it got twisted or whatever, you would take my money. I would be like, well, that, you know, that's not true. That's just BS, right? Like, right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there was some miscommunication, but it seemed pretty clear to me that Joe Rogan, like, after this, you should watch the clip. It takes like two minutes or something.
Yeah. Well, let's just put that to rest. That's not true.
All right.
That claim is not true. I don't think Dan lied. I've not known Dan to lie. So.
Okay. All right. Well, then that makes more. I mean, then we're on the same page. Like, look, if you ask me, like, if Dan Bilzerian's getting invited into all these private games, is he winning in those games? Why not? Why would he not be a winner in those games?
I mean, sometimes he is, sometimes that. It depends on the stakes. Like now he's kind of quit. He's like, he hasn't played in a while. It's like, you know, too much stress. You know, your cortisol goes up, ages you. He's really into his, you know, being built and lean right now. and like kind of just like enjoying life, and he's like, he's done. He doesn't want to play. Right.
Right.
He doesn't. He wants to go travel the world. Have hot babes, see interesting things, learn. Get in touch with himself.
Why not, man? If you want to do it and you've got the money, why not?
Yeah, I think he lives a life of like, if you had no mom, or you weren't worried what your mom and dad thought, you didn't have a boss that you were worried about, you never whatever, what would you do? I usually phrase it this way: if you had a button where you could erase everybody's memory of what happened the day before, you just hit the button. What would you do, right? And it would just be normal, right? Like, what were the things you would do? Like, I think Dan pretty much comes as closest to having that button, because he doesn't really give a fuck. He doesn't need the button, right? And so, it's close to it. Like, he does give some fucks, but very few. And it's an interesting thing. Like, I think he's kind of like everybody's guilty's pleasure. Like they're like, he's like Howard Stern. Like the kind of like, wow, if I could just not have X, Y, Z, 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 I would do the same thing, but don't tell anybody,
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like some of the stuff? I mean, there have been some, most of it's, I think, pretty hilarious or funny or cool or whatever, but there have been certain moments where it like seemed to really straddle the line, like the throwing the girl in the pool off the roof thing.
I think it's like sometimes like I call Dan, like, you're a stone cold idiot. Like, what are you doing? Like, what's the best you could get out of that? Or like, I'm like, you're an asshole. Like, you're doing an asshole thing. Like, he's a normal human being. Like, everybody, this is.
Wait,
like,
I said he threw a girl off the roof into a pool, and you responded, he's a normal human being.
I mean, imagine you had all this money and you're just trying to entertain yourself. You would do a lot of things that like work, and you would do a lot of things that don't work. And afterwards you'd be like, what a fucking idiotic thing to be doing. Like, if 3 inches this way, or if her foot was her head, she'd be dead, Or how about when there's a video where they're shooting pumpkins in the desert, and there's a bunch of girls with machine guns or whatever shooting pumpkins in the desert, and they're in a V, but the girls keep backing up and they almost shoot Rosie fucking Raw with the fucking gun. I'm like, you guys are a bunch of fucking idiots, And so there's some things that I disagree with, whatever, but I want to say that everybody expresses every trait. And depending on who they're interacting and in what scenario, they either amplify more of that trait or less of that trait, right? So they're sweet, they're kind, they're charitable, they're an asshole, they're an idiot, you know what I mean? They're selfish, they're selfless, they're X, Y, and Z. And so you have this like every human being is multifaceted, and they amplify these traits in different things. So like, you might be with your ex the biggest asshole in the world, and with the new girl, you're the sweetest, nice, most selfless, kind guy in the world. And you click, right? And those things come out, and it depends on the situation. So, I think I see Dan as like an honest person, and integrity is like real and vulnerable and charitable. I also see him as, you're a fucking asshole, idiot, always right person. So there's all these things, and he's, that's friends. And I'm pretty sure, I can guarantee, I amplify those traits. I'm pretty sure you can find something like, Perkins is such a fucking arrogant asshole. That fucking dick. You know what I mean? Like, whatever, and it comes out. And you know what? I bet you at the time or whatever, they're probably right. And so, that's my kind of view on Dan. I think the most interesting thing is that he's been given the freedom and he's doing it. And then you can look at it and say what you agree or disagree with or whatever. And I think most 17-year-old boys are like, hell fucking yes. And a lot of married men are like, hell fucking yes, secretly, right? That secret hedonist in all of us.
There are certainly many people that wish they could live that life. But I think I have a quote here from the Joe Rogan podcast. It's an exact quote, unless this person's lying, but I don't think that they are. Joe Rogan says, so how did you make all your money then? Dan says, playing poker. Joe says, you made it all from poker. Dan said, yeah. Joe said, wow, that is insane. Dan says, it is.
Were they talking about that year? Were they talking
year? There's no year anywhere.
All right, but I'm gonna go no.
All right.
If he
All
said
right.
oil and gas wells in here and a so-and-so PlayStation here and inheritance there and blah, 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 and then I made a bunch more money playing poker, I would be like, okay, I'm just going to go no.
All right,
I'm gonna go no.
fair enough. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about prop bets. You're kind of known as the prop bet guy. You've been involved in a lot of different prop bets all over the place, and I want to talk about at least a couple of them. But what kind of got you into prop bets? And I know you said earlier in the pod that you've always been kind of into gambling in that world, but specifically prop bets, is that something that you've been more involved in the last 3, 4, 5 years? Have you kind of always been doing them? What's your take on prop bets?
I mean, you know, as kids, right? Like, it's always like, I bet you won't lick that so-and-so, right? Like, that happens, right? Like, people have, like, I bet you, right? But it got serious when I went to the floor, when I was a clerk, right? There used to be a thing called the floor. Now it's all electronic computers, right? Talk about job spawn, right? Completely closed down. But it was packed. It looked like trading places, and people were constantly betting people, challenging people to do interesting things, disgusting things, etc. And so you're exposed to that, and you know, your people are constantly speculating on the unknown. So if there's some event in the future that's uncertain, you will probably find 2 people to bet on it, right? Like, right? It doesn't, as long as it's uncertain and unknown but can be known, people will bet on it. And you know, I saw it like, you know, they'd be eat that roach off the floor, and you know, I pay 10 grand, shave your head bald, whatever, in the floor, in that environment, and all these kind of challenges as a form of entertainment, right? These were guys who were fairly wealthy, or had like a consistent income of a lot of money, and they would partly try and make money and partly try and entertain themselves, right? Like, you know, the clerk who doesn't make this much money is going to eat the roach off the floor, right? You just want to see it, right?
Dude.
You just want to pay him enough to make him do it. And then the guy's sick for like 2 weeks. He got like some fantastic infection or whatever. But like, you know, so there's this kind of perverted Roman emperorish entertainment aspect to it. Like, I want to see this, you know, like, eat the lion's crap, you know, and so, and then there's also this kind of challenge betting, I bet you can't, etc. going on, etc. I think when I moved to Houston, a lot of the prop bets were like kind of self-improvement bets, like stop smoking, lose weight, you know, those were big ones, you know, run a mile in under X minutes, those type of things that were like physically challenged or very difficult but could be done. And if they don't, they got to pay you, and et cetera. So, you know, I bet people that it would stop smoking, and then like, you know, later on that night they're smoking. It's like money's in my hand, right? And you know, all kinds of things. I bet big money, and people have won. They've done like heroic diet bets, et cetera. So that's kind of where it came from, and that kind of like part entertainment, part gamble world. You know, like we're sickos. And part of me is part sicko in my, you know, infinite personality traits. So it's like I want to see that. I actually want to see you suffer. You know, I want to see. I will pay you. I'm going to put a number in front of you that you cannot refuse. You know.
Yeah, it's also funny in poker because whenever someone says like, I think this, or this is the way it is, or this is going to happen, if even one person in the room thinks that they're wrong, it's like, oh yeah, you want to bet? And that just happens so much in the world of poker. So, and it's funny because sometimes I watch other people do it and then kind of weasel their way out, and I'm like, okay, so you know they didn't really believe in it, right? But then other times I'll see something and it'll happen to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I don't want to bet on that, and it's actually kind of cool. It's like a way of like establishing sort of what the truth even kind of is in some ways.
I think it's more confidence in it, right? Like, you can have an idea that you think this was going to happen, but not so much that you want to risk a week's worth of salary on it, right? Or whatever it is. It's like, you know, so I think it's like normal people will be like, oh, really? I disagree. I think this would happen because of these factors. Okay, well, we'll see. Poker players, like, they don't even say, I disagree because of this, but like, I want to bet, right? Like, I know something you don't know, or may have an edge. We're not going to have a reasoned debate and come to a consensus or wait and see. I'm going to try and make money off of you, right? And so that's kind of that trading, speculative type of world we come from, where we think it's normal when somebody says something we disagree to go, you want to bet, right? It's not normal. I just want to say it right now. It's not normal. It's only normal in this world. And so I kind of grew up in that world of the Roman Emperorish kind of sicko entertainment slash bet, make money slash hybrid, whatever world. And, it's just been part of trading and of the trading world. And so I kind of naturally fit in the gambling world where it's always going on.
Well, you definitely like to get in there. Let's talk about the Jamie Staples bet, because I think this is one that a lot of our viewers will know about. For those of you guys that don't know about this, I'm going to say 8 months ago at this point or so, Bill bet against Jamie Staples and Matt Staples. They are brothers. They both train poker. He gave them 50-1 on their $3,000 that in 1 year's time, they had to weigh within 1 pound of each other. And they were quite a difference in weight. I don't know the exact weight. I'm sure you know this.
I think it was like, one brother was like 135 and Jamie was like 305, 310, depending on what happened that day, right? And so Jamie was he was obese, which by definition is unhealthy, but he was very unhealthy at a very unhealthy weight. And Matt was a slender guy, not necessarily muscular, but just a small, slender frame. So for them to weigh within 1 pound, they were both going to have to do some things, right?
Yes.
And mainly Jamie was going to have to do some things, right? Like the onus is really on Jamie to lose a lot of weight in a year. Not so much where it's like, super drastic, but it was going to have to be a consistent level of discipline for a year, which is very difficult. It doesn't matter what it is, like, especially when you have a weakness in that area. Like, I like those bets where it's like, well, I have this weakness, etc. I just can't find the discipline, blah, blah, blah. And, from my perspective, Jamie has all the reasons in the world to take this without a bet, right? Like, it could have been $1, but for some reason he couldn't find the motivation. And so this kind of public, there's $150,000 on the line, that gets your ego going. It kind of forced a sense of discipline on him, and which is one of the benefits he's going to get. Like, he's finding discipline in the area he's never had in his life, right? And he's gaining integrity in that area, and so that's one of the great features of it.
Yeah, I honestly, like, you look at this bet from Jamie's perspective, just such a win for him, like, everywhere. He's going to lose a lot of weight no matter what. He's already lost a ton. He's getting to like vlog the journey, and like, it's actually a pretty compelling story. So I've been checking out some of his vlogs and stuff from time to time. A lot of people are betting on it. I'm betting on it. I actually took your side here. I bet that they could not accomplish it in 1 year. So it is actually like a really cool journey. But what do you think as far as the odds you gave him? Because 50-1 are some really good odds.
I felt like I wouldn't get a good sweat if like he was going to lose 12 grand. You know what I mean? Like, if he was going to make 12 grand or 20 grand, like, he's getting if he loses, he's getting millions of dollars in value, literally millions of dollars of value. We can run through the health stats, etc., life extension, the value of a year of his life. We could do like literally millions, but he still hasn't done it, And so I wanted him to try and do this, and I wanted him to go, and I figured, I felt true odds are probably 30-1, right? And he got an extra 20. So what? So now he's going to go do it. And actually, he's shocked me with his level of discipline, and and he has the right mindset. When I asked him, I was like, "Oh, Jamie, what do you think the odds is?" He says, barring an injury, it's 100% luck, right? And you need that mindset. I do not believe that. I do not believe that. I think he's now hitting that phase of where your body resets and it becomes, he's before, when he gets on a treadmill and he walks, he's 305 pounds, he's burning a lot more calories, right? A lot more. He's knocked off 50 pounds. 1/6 of that is gone. It's harder for him to get his heart rate up. He's actually getting in shape. So all these things are, starting to like have this resistance, and his discipline has to go a bit higher. Plus, he travels a lot. He blogs. He plays poker. It's an ordeal, right? And so. And plus, his brother, weight fluctuations on that day, yada, 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 yada. So I don't believe it's a lock like he claims, but he does have the proper mindset to win.
Yeah, one of the reasons I bet against And I was kind of on the fence because I wanted to root for him, but I just like the line kept moving and people kept wanting to bet on him doing it, and it got lower and lower. And I was like, all right, you know what? Like, I love Jamie, but I also like money, so I'll get in there and I'll
Yeah.
bet on it.
I think
But one of the that point you brought up, like it's hard for people outside of the world of like just nonstop content. It's hard for them to really understand what it's like. I understand what it's like. I've made a lot of videos on YouTube, done the streaming, all the social upswing. I've done a lot of content, man. And like I've noticed like over the course of that time, I just slowly gained weight because when you finish like a long day where you spend like 6, 8, 10 hours making videos or streaming or whatever, you're not like time for some chicken and asparagus, you know, it's really hard. It's hard to be in that mindset. And like, especially like with no alcohol. I mean, I think that's like one of my personal weaknesses. I just love drinking. I was born with like the ability to not get hangovers, which has been pretty clutch for someone that has drank as much as me through my life. But I look at those things like the amount that I eat or like what I eat or like, you know, how much I drink. And it's just so hard to kind of keep those things together when you're putting in these huge long days. And he does that like every day.
Yeah, it's. I think people have a hard time relating to that, but what they can relate to is think everyone out there think of something where you have a lack of discipline, right? Like you say, I'm going to write this book, and you never write the book, or you don't get up on time, or you don't. It could be weight, it could be smoking, it could be alcohol, it could be women, it could be your temper flying off the handle. And then think of a bet, you know, a year you cannot do this, you just cannot, you know, like it's not going to happen, right? You know. You're not going to cheat or blah, 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 whatever it is. And it's like super difficult day in, day out to maintain that discipline. And that's, you know, everybody has obstacles and distractions, et cetera, and something they're out of integrity with in their life towards themselves. And so Jamie's been out of integrity with his health and his weight, and nothing has seemed to work. And so now all of a sudden in 1 year, he's going to like, you know, drop 110 pounds, you know, it's really fantastic.
There's also,
really a fantastic thing.
I totally agree. There's also a lot of social pressure. Like if he starts like pigging out and gaining weight, it's going to be really embarrassing and he's going to have to answer to a lot of people.
Yeah. And so he at least doesn't have, I think he's got enough pressure not to like go ape and like, you know what I mean? Like drinking diet soda and drinking and partying and smoking and whatever. But it's one thing to like, that pressure to stop certain bad behaviors is another thing to like get up and spend an hour on the damn treadmill or 2 hours hiking every day or whatever. And that consistency every day, like this is my routine, I have to do it. And he is on pace, but as it gets difficult, he cannot stop. And so if he does this after a year, like if he comes in at 185, I will be freaking ecstatic for him and hyper impressed.
Do you know exactly where he's at right now and where Matt's at?
I think Jamie has been losing roughly 10 pounds a month as of a month ago. I haven't got the latest update, but he was on pace. Matt actually hit a wall on gaining weight. And so, and he shouldn't really gain too much weight, so it shouldn't be healthy. Like it's really like, they're like, well, if he has to go here, he will, or something like that. But that's not the spirit or the intent of the bet. I think it's going to be really hard for him, you know, besides 10 pounds of water weight, I think it's going to be really hard for Matt to gain all that weight in a year. He's kind of plateauing at 175, I think, 175, 180. But who knows? I gotta check in with them. We'll get an update. I'll tweet it out to him and get an update.
Yeah, let me know because I've also bet like I don't know 75 on the side or something. So I'm also looking forward to the updates. What do you think about the actual day of the weigh-in? Because it seems like everyone I talk to is like, oh, that's for sure, it's a lock, it's no problem. But I actually think that there's going to be a lot of variance. I mean, 1 pound, like if they weigh in and they're 0.4, you know, different, like they weigh in on their own, and then they go to the actual weigh-in and like things are a little off, like it could hit 1 pound pretty easily.
Yeah, like certain scales aren't super sensitive or et cetera. So like they're going to weigh in on the same scale. It's going to have enough sensitivity to measure, you know, a couple digits. So that way there's not like, you know, two different people who are obviously 2 pounds apart weigh at the same number, right? Like those things will have an effect. They should, their goal is to practice weighing on another scale and dial in and do whatever they need to do, right? And so if they're close, right, you know, I think Matt is their balancer, like drink a gallon of milk or whatever it is, to get there. So he's there, and don't pee until, at the time, but there's one way in at a certain time, and that's it. And so I will be rest, but I look at pictures of Jamie and I'm just like, oh my God, like, you get to that point. In my office, I have, two of them. I have 5 pounds of fat. You ever seen 5 pounds of fat? So I don't have it here. I wish I had it to show you, but you can look online, like a model of 5 pounds of fat. It takes up a lot of volume. Like it's shocking. Like, wow, this is on my body when you're overweight. And like, so he has now got into that psychological feedback. He wants more of it, right? Like he's like, wow, I'm looking good. My face is slim, yada, yada, yada. I can fit in these new clothes. He's got that going for him right now. And I'm happy for him because, like, you just go on the internet, you look on Jamie's page, everybody's rooting for Jamie. Like, they're all rooting against me. Like, shit, how come nobody's rooting for me? Like, nobody's like, hey, Bill, great job for Jamie. I hope he weighs in within 2 pounds,
I'm rooting for that.
You're rooting for that. Thank you, Doug. But I'm really happy for him. I'm really happy for him that he's got that, he's found that discipline. And it's something that even if he loses, he will know in his mind that he can do it. Like he can have discipline. He can get there. The weigh-in is just a number day.
Once this is over, once like the weigh-in day comes, he wins or loses. Do you think that he's gonna have like the framework to succeed in this area moving forward, or do you? Because like I think he did this 4, 5, 6 years ago and he lost a lot of weight, and so that's one of the reasons he could do it was he'd use some of the same strategy, going on like a keto diet, all that kind of stuff. Do you think that it'll become part of who he is, or could you see there being some sliding? Like, does he need this like accountability to maintain that success?
I think for all of us that have like areas where our integrity, just obstacles, demons, or breakdown, you need constant vigilance, right? It's a daily battle, right? And so I think that the fact that he's gone through 365 days of accountability with other people, plus himself, etc., is developing habits, right? Like power habit, right? And so that's not to say that every day he's going to wake up and I'm at the gym and I'm going to do this and I'm going to eat right, etc. And I'm not going to go bananas. That's a no, right? But I think he does have a much better chance and a much better framework to work with, so as not to be 285 plus. Again. He has it. Like we all have those tools. And so, going through this boot camp that he's basically going through will help, right? And he's young enough where he's easier to change, right? The military takes people in all the way up to 21. They take people from all walks of life and they turn them into killers, right? So that people can change, right? They turn them into highly paid professional killers, right? And so, Jamie's now changing himself into a disciplined human being in this area of his life, and I think he will have some modicum of success on a go-forward basis. At least I hope he does.
Yeah, I think so too. So let's talk about the Chicago Joey bet. For another bet, I don't know the specifics of this one as much. Do you want to talk about it?
So Joey has 3-1. He couldn't swim. He said he swore he's never swam in his life. And during Streamboat, which is like last month, right? He was going to swim a mile in the ocean, an ocean swim, which is different than a pool swim. And so he took lessons, started swimming, and that was going to go on. And unfortunately, we had 2 hurricanes hit the islands, and they're pretty much all wiped out, no power, etc. And my boat is gone, And so, focus, my life balance shifted from whatever it was then to relocating kids, helping people out on the islands, doing all this stuff, and etc. And so that bet got postponed. He was given 3-1, I think, on $5,000, and it's postponed. So I don't think he's getting any extra edge because he's not out there swimming and training. And we will do it later on. But it's a lot different swimming in the ocean than it is swimming in a pool where it's flat, etc. Right? Ask any swimmer. And so I think the odds are proper. I think the odds are proper. I think it is extremely tired swimming in the ocean, and you swallow more salt water, and it fucks with your stomach, and it's a bitch, you know. And I'm down there every day, like swimming and coming out, and I'm like, shit, I would freaking hate that. Your arms swell up, you get so pumped up. It's annoying.
Well, sounds like good times for Joey.
Yeah, it's good times. I mean, he could do it. It's not like it's impossible, you know. And I had a good course for him too, where he would go back and forth, so there would never ever be like net current help. It would be like, chop. And so really, it's like, how choppy is that day? There's certain days where it's like no one can do it, and I wouldn't put him in that. I don't want him to die. I guaranteed him he wouldn't die.
Yeah, let's not have Joey die. I like Joey.
No, I did not want him to die. I didn't want to die. And so we were thinking about doing it in the Bahamas, but I'm like, there's real shark attacks in the Bahamas. Like the Bahamas has, people don't realize, like the Atlantis Casino in the Bahamas, like there's a couple of shark attacks, every other year swimming around there. And, one of the times I went snorkeling with the sharks, you just go out and they lower a chum bucket and the sharks go to the chum bucket and you're snorkeling over the sharks. And that was like one of the scariest days of my life. I mean, the boat was literally from here to that wall, or maybe like twice that. It felt like it was 8 miles away. 8 miles away. Like I was like, oh my God, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm swimming back, and I'm like, make sure that bucket's still down. Okay, make sure that bucket. I do not want to get eaten. That type of thing.
Count me out for any experience that potentially involves sharks.
Yeah.
I'm out for that. Sorry, let me be clear. Me in the water with sharks, that could get me. Count me out for that.
Yeah, it's no fun. And like, even if they just bite you, it's like your day is really, it's just like, even if they bite you and survive, it's just such a bad day.
Yeah, you're gonna lose like a limb.
It's like it's not good,
All
Or
right,
even if it's like half hanging off and your muscle tissues is hanging, you're bleeding, and you got the I didn't want to even deal with that, No.
Yeah, let's not do any shark bites. So let's talk about the recovery effort going on in the Caribbean right now. Obviously, the hurricanes just like wrecked the Caribbean. I know you're based out of that area, right? U.S. Virgin Islands or
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, U.S. Virgin Islands. So all the Virgin Islands are kind of together, and then like 75 miles to the west is Puerto Rico, or 70 miles to the west is Puerto Rico. And so Irma came down and just basically bowling balled all the Virgin Islands. There's 40 islands, and no island was spared. 90% infrastructure damage, and some flooding. And then after that, we had Maria come by, and although that didn't directly go over the islands, the way the eye wall worked, it flooded what wasn't destroyed. And then, it hit Puerto Rico famously and knocked out all its power and flooded it and caused the chaos, etc. So in the middle of like day 4, I flew back in as soon as the military got the airport on a compassionate call sign and brought emergency supplies to the hospital, right? Because they were SOSing. And a lot of people don't understand is that when there's a disaster like that, there's no communications. Like the towers go down, there's no cell phone service, nobody knows what's going on. Very few people had communications out. I got communications out from the head surgeon to his girlfriend in Connecticut, who was a nurse, and then she called me. She's like, "You're going in." We loaded up the jet with like gens and machetes and I don't know, insulin and whatever they requested. Flew down, land, was able to get in on a compassionate call sign, which other planes could not land because FEMA takes it over because they're trying to get in. They're just trying to make sure people don't die. And, there's not that much communication. We got that in, and then kind of focused on, okay, where am I going to make a difference here, right? Like on the islands, because at the end of the day, like once FEMA comes in, their job is, you dying, you need a hospital, out, we'll take you out of here, or you're not dying, you need water, you're not dead, fine. And that's it. Like they don't care about your quality of life, etc. It's just die, don't die. You're not going to die in the next 3 days. You're not going to survive, etc. And they've done their job. And actually, as far as the Virgin Islands, they actually did a very good job from my standpoint. I mean, there's a lot of complaints about X, Y, and Z, but I was very impressed with what FEMA did, the resources that were marshaled, etc. Yeah, there could have been a couple more distribution stations. Yeah, they ran out of tarps, etc. They didn't have enough tarps on hand, but like it takes a while to procure these tarps, etc. But after that, it's like, okay, I'm alive, but like I don't have a job, I don't have a roof over my head, I don't have any power, I can't flush my toilets, I can't take a shower because I don't have any power, and it's going to be like that way for months. And so, you know, I directly was giving funds to organizations that go out and help people and, you know, build roofs together. But I also felt that one thing that wasn't going to happen immediately, and which would greatly improve people's lives, is bringing down portable generators. So, and that nobody was going to go there, right? Because I don't want to be duplicative, right? I don't want to be like, well, I'm bringing down food and pallets of water. That'd be idiotic, right? FEMA's got that on lock, and I can't compete with the federal government on there. But what they weren't going to be doing is getting power to people so that they and their neighbors could shower, wash their hands, you know, flush a toilet, these type of things. And so I focused my efforts on that, and getting like chainsaws to people so they can clear their yards and stuff like that. And so the island, you know, had a dip. Maria came and had another dip, and it's finally stabilized and on its way back. And so, you know, 500 linesmen from across the country are down there helping them, trying to, you know, string power poles up. You know, there's distribution centers that finally that are opening up, and ships are coming from Florida. You know, when Puerto Rico got, you know, we were getting supplies from Puerto Rico. When Puerto Rico went down, it was like, you know, not only did we not have the supply route coming through, they needed, you know, FEMA supplies. So it was really a chaotic and time, and very stressful for those, you know, on the edge. And now they're rebuilding it and getting the power back. And pretty soon it's going to be a story of, we're back. We need our tourists back. We need our businesses back. And let's, you know, let's rock and roll. So
how long do you think it's going to be before, you know, the area is back to what it was before? And also, you know, look, like the way that global warming is going, I think we can all agree global warming is a thing. To what extent, it's hard to say, but it does seem like these things are you know, becoming worse. Are you worried about like long term being able to stay there? Are people worried about, if we're gonna just like ignore some of these environmental concerns, that like it's only gonna get worse for some of these islands?
yeah, I think, you know, I think that's a concern. You know, the islands are it's a vacation area, right? So I do think people will vacation, but like it needs the Bill Perkins, the so-and-so who owns this. It needs all these people who have mobility to want to be there. And what I'm concerned about is that, you know, Joe multimillionaire or Joe business owner is like, oh, I'm not going to, what, every 5 years I'm going to have like get wiped out and have to deal with the hassle. Like forget it. I'm not spending $3 million on a house there or whatever I need, or moving my people down there. I'm just not going to deal with it. And so, you know, at the end of the day, that economics and that change in the economics and what the island is about is going to be devastating, I think, for years to come, whether it's a result of just the storm or global warming, et cetera. I think like people are starting to have concerns about where they put their real estate and where they locate, you know, even if it's just Miami, right? Miami's flooding more and more and more and more and more for some reason, because of for some reason, whatever. Like, you know, yeah, the mayor may be Republican, but he, you know, he firmly believes in global warming. He's like, we got to do something about it. If you ask insurance companies, they're very concerned about global warming and disaster effects. So my biggest concern for the islands, you know, getting back to where it is, getting back to like you can go vacation, I think a year. I mean, you can go before then, et cetera, but a lot of the places, like you go to Joost Van Dyke, all the places you see me on my Instagram or whatever, it's going to be a bit before they get their infrastructure. And it's like, oh, I'm going to this island, I'm stopping over 5 minutes. Let's go over this island. Let's jump in the boat and swim up to this restaurant. It's so cool. I mean, the Brits, the Marriott, the so-and-so, they're closed for a year on St. Thomas. So I feel very confident that it's going to be at least a year before it's back to where it was. And I think in certain ways, the psyche, the awareness people now have of what's going on, certain ways it will never recover, right? It's just like, I'm not going there. I'm not going to Beirut. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to Syria. You know, like it's like war could break out at any time, or any kind of situation like that. It will still be a lovely vacationing paradise at some point. It's just what do we do in the meantime type businesses. And bless you if you're going to sneeze.
You know, I was going to sneeze, but then it didn't happen. So, yeah. So I guess like, you know, I just hope that the recovery effort goes well. I hope that everything gets back to normal. You know, obviously, I hope that like the people that live on those islands can get their livelihoods back. And I guess it just really kind of shows the real damage that hurricanes can have. And I think we kind of forgot about it for a little bit since Katrina. When Hurricane Katrina happened, my dad moved down to New Orleans and started a nonprofit to get disaster victims extremely cheap furniture by partnering with larger companies that had furniture to donate. And so, at least in my family, my dad's always helped people. My mom's a nurse. I hear a lot about what it's like to help people and all the stuff that's going on out there. But it has been a few years since we've seen hurricanes of this magnitude, and they really do change the lives of the people that live there for some time to come.
Yeah, it's 60% of the businesses failed, small businesses failed in New Orleans after that storm, and so there's just legacy effects that people have to just keep fighting and fighting and fighting. The good thing is that you get a chance to show up when these things happen, right? Like you wish they didn't, but I get a chance to show up. I get a chance to use my brain and think about, okay, what do people need that I can make a difference and not just be redundant, right? And money just goes into a coffer somewhere. How do I make an impact here? Why am I here on this planet? Like what is my role to play? And I have many roles to play, and this is one of them. And I'm thankful I get to do that. And I'm not the only one. There are thousands and thousands of people playing their part to overcome this obstacle that's going on and get people's lives back together and get the island back together and make it the robust paradise playground that it is. And so I'm happy to witness that, and I'm happy to be a part of that.
Well, that is definitely an uplifting note to end it on there. So I think that's just about going to do it here for us today, guys. Bill, is there anything else that you wanted to say before we call it a sesh here?
No, I think we call it a session. If there's anything else, we can pick it up another time. Chitty chat about poker, cards, risk, life, women, whatever you want.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on today. I know it wasn't as poker heavy as some of the podcasts we've done here on the channel, but sometimes I just like to talk about some of the subjects that I really find interesting, and there were a lot of great topics in here. So, Bill, I just want to thank you for coming on the pod today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Have a good day.
You too, man. We finally did it, guys. Got Bill Perkins here for a podcast. And just one last quick reminder, I'm going to try and do some cryptocurrency podcasts over my secondary channel, the Coin Central channel. But I need 10,000 subscribers to have podcasts. I don't make the rules. Google does, unfortunately. So if you're interested in seeing that happen, head over to the channel and subscribe for some cryptocurrency podcasts. All right, guys, that's going to do it here. I want to say thank you for everyone for stopping by. As always, good to see you guys. A couple quick shouts in the chat. Harbs, my boy, in the mix. What's up? How's it going? Chris Salmon. I don't know why I could pronounce that word. Bad Apple Garage. Jerry Escato. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone that tuned in today. What do we got coming here up on the channel? Well, we're going to be doing a few hand reviews in the near future. Got maybe some Poker Night in America hands, maybe some Poker After Dark hands. We'll see what happens. We'll do a few poker hands episodes, and then we'll see what's happening. Maybe some more news. We like the breaking news. If you guys did not get a chance to check out yesterday's video, almost said podcast, I would strongly recommend checking it out. I think it's a good one. I think you're going to like it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for me. I'll see you later. Peace.